Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. Today we're going to be looking at another retrospective on Tom Clancy's The Division 2. And this stemmed from some of the conversations we were having on stream last night. For those of you who know, I took a break from streaming for a while because I started a few projects, and now I think I might be able to get back to doing some streams, perhaps a few every month, but we'll see how it all works out. Now, pretty much what this is just prequel bias, and this is a phenomenon, or this could be termed as phenomena, that happens when fans usually rave about the prequel of some entertainment, or some form of, I would say, leisure activity, in the sense of maybe books, movies, games, or whatever. Many a time you will hear that the originals of these things were better in regard to writing. Sometimes they say it's better in regard to acting, story, plot, and we see the very same thing happen in The Division and The Division 2. Many players still love The Division 1, and many people cannot necessarily put a finger sometimes as to what they love about The Division 1 that they don't seem to be able to find in Division 2. Now, yes, we can say perhaps there are mechanics in The Division 1 that they probably like better than The Division 2, but I don't think that at the same time it's necessarily the fact that everything in The Division is bad. I think sometimes there is a little bit of that case of prequel bias. Now, even though I may say that, these things, or the reason perhaps lies at the feet of the player themselves, I'm making this video because I feel like overall the buck stops with the development team, or the author, or the director of the movie, or whatever. If you're making a continuation of your story or of your entertainment product, you ought to be able to, as the developer, director, author, whatever, you ought to be able to sell your vision to your fans or your community and bring them along with what it is you're trying to do. One thing about artists is, in many cases, artists get really jittery and sometimes they get bored. So for them, many a time, they don't want to repeat the things that, in a sense, do work, for their fan base. They always want to continue to express their creativity. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of the life of art. And so we see it many times where somebody makes a very good movie and they're just like not interested in making anything regarding that franchise, or they want to go ahead and do something that's different. In the case of CD Projekt Red, they did The Witcher 3 games, and they decided, no, we want to change, we want to move to somewhere else, we want to go do something that is not in the genre of the games that we had been making. So they moved to Cyberpunk 2077 in an artistic style. You also see the very same thing with Rocksteady Studios. They made the Arkham games, basically establish what superhero games should be in the gaming market, and then they decided we don't want to touch Batman anymore. And Rocksteady is truly going to design a game in the Arkham universe, but it is not going to be a Batman game, as they've actually said they were most likely not going to do. And so I look at Tom Clancy's The Division, and I look at all these different games, and I say, what is the defining marker for sequels that are successful, especially in gaming? And I think those sequels are based on the ability of the designers, or the people who actually do make these sequels, to be able to bring their community along. And I think this is one big failure when we look back in retrospect of Massive Studios Ubisoft. Now, Massive Ubisoft made a bunch of money selling The Division 1. They also made a very decent amount of money selling The Division 2, but I don't necessarily think that they carried along the community to buy into their vision, because as different as The Division 2 is, it's a very good game at the core. I mean, you can argue with me all day. The Division 2 is a solid entry when it comes to RPG looter shooters. If somebody had never played The Division 1 before and you gave them The Division 2, they would be telling you that this game is the best thing that they've ever played when it comes to a game set in a realistic open world with all the mechanics that it does. I'm saying that, but many of your, most of your OG Division 1 players, and you're laughing thinking, well, that's probably not the case for you. And that's very true, because you've already kind of been spoiled by the original nature of The Division 1. So that's where I kind of see some of these different, opinions come to kind of a screeching halt when, we can't really come to the point where we say, what are the good things about the Division 1 without importing our prequel bias? But like I said, if Massive had taken the time to really bring the community in on what their vision was, not just from a marketing perspective to just sell a game, but from a vision perspective to where they see the game and where they want the game to go, I definitely think that the community would have been on board. I don't think if they had actually employed that kind of, community relationship, which was what they had in the Division 1. I think if they had that same kind of relationship, it would have really translated further down the road with the Division 2. And I'll explain in a little bit more detail. So I remember Yannick was in an interview. It was a Kotaku interview. It was a written one, I think. And he said something along the lines of, however we made the game, we knew people were going to still go ahead and complain. So we went ahead and made the game, however it is that we felt that the game needed to be made. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, except that in many cases, there's everything wrong with that. And the Division community is a very passionate community. One, not just a community that he's not aware of, but a community that he is very aware of, and a community that he knows and has some sort of a relationship with that has been brewing and developing from the Division 1. So I think at that point, knowing that your community would still have some qualms with your new game, and you know that this new game needs to be made this way, the buck stops with the creative director. This is not Yannick, by the way. I think it was Julian Garrity, to have pulled people into his vision or found a way to be able to say, this is the direction that we want to go, and their community, we want you to join us in this direction. Now, I will give you a game that has done this in a phenomenal sense, and I cited this in my conversation while we were on stream, and you guessed it, it's Mortal Kombat 11 and the developers from NetherRealm. And by the way, they have not done this in the most perfect way. They've just also struggled, but they've come to the point of understanding where they know that their fan base will definitely be, that fan base that continues to pull them through and they continue to interact with, because fighting games are a very niche market, a very unique point. And I always bring Mortal Kombat 11 into conversations, by the way, forgive me, because the game is a month apart from the Division 2. They came out in the same year. Division 2 came out a month before Mortal Kombat 11. So Mortal Kombat 11 for the longest time had a lot of the community complaining that MKX, which is MK10, was the better game, or Mortal Kombat 9 was such a good game. But it seemed like the direction that the developers wanted to go was something that was very different. For those of us who didn't play MKX or MK9, I thought Mortal Kombat 11 was such a good game because I never really got to play MKX like a lot of people did. But on playing MK11, I was like, this looks like a better and a more improved game. But the community at first did not like the game. They were not fans of a lot of the mechanics, a lot of the systems, and a lot of things they felt were lacking. But over time, the development team continued to pull them through on the vision as to what they wanted this game to be. Now, in their case, it was a tactful way. They looked for ways to be able to take their time to balance the game and eventually make the game a reflection of some of those things that were fun from the prior game. Now, what were those things that were fun? They started to bring out characters and add them to the game, but these characters were reflections of the former games that had come into play. So people who were in tune with the lore, the hardcore players, they really felt a sense of belonging, knowing that these characters were not just being put into the game from a weird place. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some hardcore players who were very much against the way the story went and other things. I'm talking from a technical standpoint regarding combat and fighting. And so this is what they continued to do, and they made sure that they listened to their community in spite of the publisher demands that must have probably been there for them. And these publisher demands probably were things that had shown up years ago, because Mortal Kombat, being an almost 3-decade franchise, has gone through all kinds of thick and thin. And, Warner Brothers being their publisher right now was not the case in the past. They used to be Midway, and it seemed like, Warner Brothers came in and procured the studio perhaps after Midway went out of business. And as a game developer, you really need to keep the lights on and pay your best developers to do a good job for you. So they do have that understanding that it's this community that's going to basically pull them through, and they've been responding very heavily. In fact, one of the most requested characters in Mortal Kombat 11, or in all of Mortal Kombat, basically since I followed that community, was Melina. And they finally delivered on Melina, and she is very, very much reminiscent of the particular Melina that they were actually asking for. Not just Melina has been modified like many of the other characters, but Melina that was very close to the Melina of MKX, because that is the Melina that the community loved, and they delivered. In our case with the Division, we requested and asked for survival forever, but this team just folded their hands and refused to barge on that vision. And I think this is where they failed, because in that whole transaction of trying to have somebody buy into your vision, you have to be willing to put some measure of good faith. And we talked about the advancements and the improvements of the story and the lore that they've made in the Division, and a lot of open map areas that were added. We talked about Kinley College. If you even think about Coney Island, you think about the map that they had in the Manning National Zoo, which was a decent story plot. But if you also look at the Pentagon and these other missions that were added in different map areas, at some point or any point, they could have used one of those locations to bring survival to the Division 2. And I think this gesture would have really held back, a lot of the vitriol that they got when they made a very big mistake, which is when they had the glitch from Warlords of New York. Because apparently, even though your game is buggy, your community can still support you, from what we're seeing with Cyberpunk 2077. A lot of the CD Projekt Red fans are saying, we know CD Projekt Red, is probably in a tough time, and we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. My jaw is hitting the ground, and it's actually a little bit, I would say, stressful for me, because I remember how the community refused to give Massive the benefit of the doubt when Warlords of New York was going through its own issues. But at the same time, you can't, necessarily blame your community when you refused to actually bring them on your team, while other game development teams are bringing their own community on their side. So dear Massive, if there's anything that you have learned from this Division 2 journey, it's this: bring your community along on your side with you. We're the ones that are going to keep the lights on. You're not going to go find another community out there. It's the community of gamers that are basically enjoying your games and your products that are going to continue to do so. But here's the thing: we're not going to continue to blindly do it. One day, someone's going to make a game that will probably answer all these questions, and at that point, you would have lost your community. Right now, you might be sitting on this particular seat that no one is making a realistic-based RPG looter shooter like you are, but it's not for too long. Technology is about to catch up and sneak up on you. You watch and see. The next few years are going to be interesting, and I want you guys to succeed, but you can't necessarily just sit apathetically and think that no one is going to challenge you for your community of gamers who are making you hundreds of millions of dollars. Beware, somebody else wants that check in their bank account, and they will come and we will give them that money if they deliver a product that's just as good. Anyways, these are my thoughts on this matter. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Hit the subscribe button if you're new to the Gamey Daddy community, and I guess we can continue the conversation in comments. Thank you for your time and audience. Peace out.